Natural Habitat Adventures is pleased to be bringing you this webinar, Witness the Wonder of the Aurora, presented by Court Whalen, PhD. We're broadcasting live today from Boulder, Colorado. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Court before I turn it over to him. Court's background in wildlife and conservation biology led him to pursue a joint PhD in ecotourism and entomology, while simultaneously coordinating and guiding small group wildlife expeditions and ecotourism adventures around the world. From leading nature safaris to such far-flung places as Papua New Guinea and Madagascar to locales closer to home such as Costa Rica, Belize, and Mexico. And in addition to a passion for discovery, teaching, and adventure, Court also is an avid nature and wildlife photographer and is always eager to share his knowledge and creative guidance with his guests. And when he isn't planning and leading nature safaris, you'll find Court hiking on the trails from his backyard in Colorado, fly fishing in a nearby canyon, or taking some turns on any number of beautiful ski slopes in Colorado's high country. Court, excited to be here with you today, and I'm thinking some of the photos that we'll be seeing will be yours, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Pleased to be able to put some of them on show for you today.
Well, I'll turn it over to you and let you get started.
All right, thanks so much, Lee. Well, yeah, welcome, folks. I'm really privileged here to be talking about really one of the biggest wonders of the world, and that's the Aurora, a very fitting title. We're, in the course of this expedition, going to be seeing something that songs and fables and stories and all sorts of mystery has been surrounding for really hundreds and even thousands of years, and it's still to this day one of the most magnificent, mysterious, fascinating things to see, especially in person, whether it's your first time or your 100th time. So yeah, pleased today to be talking a little bit about the Aurora itself and also about the expedition that we lead each year from January to March to the Aurora Oval up in Churchill, and I'll talk more about that in the coming slides. So to start things off, to put a face with the name, I tend to be the person that's behind the camera more often than not, so here is a very rare befuddled-looking photo of me as I peer into the camera, seeing if the time-delayed photo has taken yet with the group of fellow travelers behind me. But that's me in full expedition gear in the middle of the winter in Churchill at about -20 degrees, enjoying life. So the first question is, why would you want to leave the comfort of your home in the middle of winter and go up to the Arctic tundra? Well, this photo kind of says it all. It is just a glorious place. It has this very mysterious austerity, but also just an incredible beauty behind it. We are going to the true Arctic tundra, and photos like this really capture it. It's not just about the Aurora necessarily. There's all sorts of other beautiful scenes to see, like these windy, snow-covered plains here with some black and white spruce trees. But, of course, the Aurora really steals the show at night, and that is one of the focuses of the trip, obviously. But again, you know, like I was saying, it's a multi-dimensional trip. One of the things that I found most amazing as I've guided and developed this trip is that it's indeed multi-dimensional. You have incredible evenings, you have incredible mornings. Obviously, the nighttime scenes with the Aurora are spectacular, but the daytime scenes are equally amazing. And that's what I love about this trip, is it's obviously focused on the Aurora, but we're doing quite a bit more than that too, and it's going to leave you with a lot of great photographs or just simply impressions of your time up there. Even if we're caught in the middle of a blizzard or a snowstorm, it can be beautiful, just an absolute amazing sensation to be up in the Arctic during one of these storms. So scenes like this could certainly be on the agenda for a trip that we do up there. And at night, even though the Aurora tends to steal the show, there are beautiful scenes that surround us, beautiful photographs to take, beautiful views to hold and to cherish for over the years. And even when we're getting nice clear skies at night, the Aurora isn't only the only thing that steals the show here, like this reflection, this prism that's actually extending out beyond a full moon. Oftentimes, if you've personally ever been in the Arctic, you'll hear of folks talking about sundogs. Well, I call this one a moon cat. And this is a good time to bring up, you know, a lot of times people, the initial question they have is, well, what is a full moon going to do to my Aurora trip? Well, I think this kind of says it all. There's a lot to be had on full moon trips. A lot of folks familiar with astronomy will say, well, wouldn't it be better to have a pure dark sky to see stars better, to see the aurora better? Yeah, that's certainly one side of the coin, but there's also this side of the coin, and also like the first photo in this presentation where the full moon can really be quite amazing to include in your photos and memories of the trip. But let's be honest, the trip's really all about sled dog puppies. Sort of kidding there, but so getting back to the aurora itself, I want to kind of talk a little bit about why Churchill is such an amazing place. Obviously, when you go online or you hear from friends, there are a variety of places in the world that either advertise great aurora viewing or they might have special packages or information. But I want to tell you, really, when you're doing your research, to look out for this one thing. It's called the Aurora Oval, and what it is it's centered around geomagnetic north. Not the actual North Pole, but the Earth's axis is slightly tilted, and the magnetic anomaly that goes through it is going to sort of be centered a little bit askew from where our actual North Pole is. So geomagnetic north has its own sort of circle going around it, and we'll sort of show a diagram in the coming slides as to why this oval is important, but this is where all the aurora activity is concentrated in the North Pole. This exact same thing occurs in the South Pole as well, but the way where it goes over is mostly going to be ocean, actually, in the southern part of the Earth. So that's why you always hear the North Pole, the northern areas, as being one of the better places on the planet to see the aurora. But anyway, so you have this very relatively thin band that sort of cuts across the northern part of our Earth, and this is again where most aurora is concentrated. And you'll see our little area of Churchill being right smack dab in the middle of the Aurora Oval, which is why it makes it so special. Churchill boasts over 300 days out of the year that exhibits an aurora that you can visibly see. And just to show a little bit more like a satellite graphic, this is showing the probability of an aurora on a given night. I just pulled this up as a random example, and you can see how this big swath of magnetic activity and aurora activity is going right over Hudson Bay, and as the night gets a little bit later, that peak area that gets a little bit in the yellow or orange just sort of circles as the Earth rotates right over the Churchill area. So it's a really phenomenal place. When it comes down to it, this is the guy we really have to think about it all, and this is our sun. It's a huge, big ball of hydrogen, basically, that is constantly going through nuclear fission and separating protons from electrons. If you go back to 10th grade chemistry class, you'll remember that hydrogen is basically the simplest element out there. It's just one proton and one electron. So what happens when you have temperatures as hot as the sun, as high as 6,000 degrees Kelvin in the core, and maybe even 1,000,000 degrees out towards the outer edge, you have a lot of chemical splitting going on. And basically what happens is the sun and its heat splits hydrogen into a proton and electron, and then sends those shooting to Earth at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's pretty impressive. So what's happening is you have all these little tiny particles, these little missiles that are shooting out into the atmosphere, and they're shooting, just as likely at Mercury and Venus and Mars as it is to Earth. But we happen to be here and we get to witness this incredible phenomenon that results, which is the aurora. So what's happening, just kind of a diagram here, is as this solar wind, which is basically all these small particles, goes towards Earth, we have this great thing around our Earth, around our planet, called a magnetic shield. And this is really, we don't get enough credit in today's world. It's protecting us all in a very, very big way. If we didn't have this magnetic shield, there's no way any life would ever be able to survive on planet with all these streaming particles shooting through space at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. They might be small, but they create big effects. And we actually do see a lot of effects with satellites. They often get bombarded with these solar particles. So whenever you hear of a huge solar flare, often in the news it comes out as, well, you might have a little bit of GPS misreception, but we're always focused on what it's doing to the aurora. So what happens is you have these magnetic field lines that direct down towards Earth. You can see that in the right part of the screen. And those two little green circles, those are the aurora ovals I was telling you about. So the magnetic lines, they dip towards Earth in this very predictable pattern, and they all funnel down right around this green circle. So what happens is as these particles go streaming forward, they're funneled down towards Earth, and that's when they interact with atmospheric oxygen and nitrogen. And that's, plain and simple, that's what's creating the aurora, is bombardment of these little tiny solar wind particles, these electrons and protons, hitting oxygen and hitting nitrogen and exploding. And then the energy that oxygen and nitrogen release comes in the form of this beautiful light that we see. It gets instantly quite a bit more complicated, but that previous slide kind of gives a summary. You have all these various lines going from the morning side of the Earth to the evening side of the Earth, and all sorts of different stuff that we'll probably talk about during the expedition, but this is a pretty complicated graph, so let me give you guys a little palette cleanser. Here we have an Arctic fox kit. Okay, we're all good. We're back to normal. Enough with the real nitty-gritty science there. But what you really need to know is in this chart, and this shows sort of the elevation above the Earth's surface where we're likely to see the aurora. We're starting at about 60 miles above the Earth's surface, and that's where you see the very bottom of this curtain. That's where that sort of purplish hue starts to form. And then you have all the green, and then finally you have the highest bombardment of particles producing red. If you look on the very, very bottom, you're looking at, that's where the mountain ranges reach. That's where the plane flies. That's where most of the clouds are going to be. So very often what our chances are of seeing the aurora has so much to do with what's going on with the clouds. And again, you might wonder, well, if Churchill is such a great place and you're seeing aurora 300 days out of the year, why would you go during the winter? Well, the main reason is that it's generally too cold for precipitation to form. So you don't really get many clouds in the winter there. So you get just amazingly clear skies and the best viewing all year. We do a lot of trips up to Churchill to see polar bears, and there's certainly a chance of seeing the aurora. Same thing goes with the summertime period in our Arctic summer programs. But again, the chance of clouds in either of those times, it's a little bit higher, especially in fall. So the winter is by far the best time of year to go. And again, you get all these other great bells and whistles like this beautiful Arctic landscape that I'll show some more photos of. But basically, just to kind of reiterate, so what we're happening is a bombardment of particles. That very, very thin bottom line, that pink or purple, is actually all atmospheric nitrogen. So when nitrogen explodes, it produces the purple. All that green, that's oxygen. So when those particles hit oxygen, it creates that beautiful green color. And then the highest red part is also oxygen, but it takes on a little bit different form when you get to that really, really high altitude, high elevation profile, over 250 miles above Earth. So again, what we're looking at is elements being bombarded, exploding, and letting off light. It's very similar to how a neon light actually works. One of the coolest things is that Earth is not the only planet to have an aurora. Here's a photo from Jupiter exhibiting an aurora on its magnetic pole, or around its magnetic pole on its aurora oval. And so what a lot of astronomers and scientists will use is big telescopes to see if there are green auroras on other planets and other solar systems. And guess what that tells us? Well, if there's a green aurora, that spectrum of light is being emitted by oxygen. And bam, all of a sudden we find a planet with oxygen on it. So pretty cool stuff. There's a long tradition, a long history behind the aurora, all sorts of things that we're going to learn together on the trip. A lot of really cool myths and stories and fables, and stretching all the way up until the present, where we're learning by leaps and bounds each and every year as to what's causing it and what it can really do for us as this sort of magnetosphere generator. Maybe one day the aurora and the components are going to power all of our power plants on Earth. Who knows? We'll talk more about it on the trip. But sort of getting back to some aurora pictures and aurora topics and considerations, let me show you what the aurora is not. So I want to kind of set expectations out there, because it's so easy to Google aurora and you see these colors that look like it's out of a Disney cartoon, and the incredible yellows and blues and purples and magentas and all sorts of wild colors. I don't want you to go onto the trip expecting that this is what it's necessarily going to be like, because these are photoshopped, just to be perfectly honest. But what it does show you is this incredible, incredible scene of this beautiful, mysterious green light. And again, getting back to what the stars and the moon provide for it, and this foreground of the spruce trees, it's an amazing, amazing thing. And again, looking out for that little thin sheet of pinks and purples and the high atmospheric red, you never can predict exactly where it's going to be. You could see red on any given night. Not every night's going to have red or pink, but maybe every night on your trip does have that. You just never really know. It has a lot to do with what the sun's doing, like I started my talk with. When we're seeing the aurora, we're seeing all sorts of different forms and shapes as well. And we're starting off from the top with what's known as a homogeneous arc, sort of the beginning of an aurora. As we see it in the sky, it almost looks like a very thin band of very high altitude clouds. So again, homogeneous arc, and then it starts to take this really rayed form in that image just below the top one, where you start to get this real pronounced streaking. And then finally it develops into this beautiful curtain, and it's starting to move around, and it's like watching fireworks. And then finally at the very bottom, if you're directly underneath it, you have what's known as the corona, or crown. And that's, again, why Churchill is so amazing, because with the aurora being directly overhead, you get to see so many different dimensions of these folds and curtains that it makes. Auroras can be visible from all over Earth. We've seen them in northern U.S. We saw them in Colorado not too long ago. But what happens, we sort of get into the idea of trigonometry, is as we're farther away from the aurora and from that band, it looks to be lower and lower on the horizon. So even on a big solar storm, if we are outside in our backyards in Colorado and we see that aurora, it's really just going to be a very thin band all the way on the horizon, as if it was the last rays of a sunset. The great thing about being up in the Arctic and in Churchill is that this thing is directly overhead. It is all around you. It's as if you're in the middle of a haunted house fog machine with this thing swirling around the atmosphere directly over your heads. It's just incredibly, incredibly exciting. So just to show you some pictures kind of going along with the chart that I just showed. So we're starting off when we first see it appear, usually it's sometime after dinner in the first hours of the night. Again, very hard to predict exactly when, but we're starting to see what's known as the homogeneous arc. It's sort of this thin band, almost like clouds in the sky. And then quickly, as you have what's known as an auroral substorm, you have these particles really, really starting to stream down, and it transitions into this rayed arc phenomenon. And then, as it gets more and more pronounced, here's a photo from Churchill, is this sort of streaming curtain-like effect. And again, watching this whole thing develop in front of your very eyes, watching this river of electrons and elements and color all around you is pretty fantastic. And then it doesn't happen every night or necessarily every trip, but to get a full-on corona where it's literally you are directly underneath the aurora, it's as if the heavens are just reaching down directly to you, just streaming right down. It's pretty fantastic. So yeah, kind of getting into the logistics of the trip itself to tell you sort of what the trip's all about. Let's start the trip on day one. You arrive into Winnipeg. Our first and last nights are always spent in Winnipeg, very much like our polar bear trips if you've had the opportunity to go on one of those. Historic Fort Garry Hotel, a beautiful sort of Gothic-style old railway hotel, just beautiful in historic Winnipeg, downtown Winnipeg, near the confluence of two major rivers. So great jumping off point. We have our welcome dinner, orientation dinner. We get you some great winter gear, parkas, snow pants, gloves, you name it. We get you outfitted for the trip. And then we make our way up to Churchill. We have two different ways that we get up there. One is by plane. We have a flight with Calm Air, and this is more typical on our photographic trips. So we also have two different styles of trips, our traditional ones and then those that are more photographically oriented. Our photo trips will always take the plane. Okay, so we fly up there and we fly down, and we spend the middle 4 nights up in Churchill. Most of our non-photo trips will have the option to go by train, and it's this beautiful 2-day journey across the boreal forest and across the tundra, making your way from Winnipeg through Thompson up to Churchill. Remember, there are no roads up to Churchill, so there's only rail or flights. There are a couple trips each season of our non-photo trips that will take the plane. You just have to talk to your adventure specialist here about that. And let me step back and say that when you do take the train, you'd take the train up and you'd fly back down. So it wouldn't necessarily be train both ways. But again, we have something to fit your needs. If you've always been interested in taking that train, there are trips that do that. If you prefer to make your way up there on a 2.5, 3-hour flight opposed to a train trip that takes a couple of days, then we have those for you too. And once we get up to Churchill, it's really a winter wonderland. Even if you're used to snowy environments, it's got this I've said it before, this beautiful austerity where there's just snow and white wilderness everywhere. It's really an amazing place. Churchill itself is a really delightful, quirky little town, very small, but amazing people that live there, and they're eager to share with you sort of their story and what the town's all about. And we're going to have that as part of our trip. I think that it's also an amazing time of year to go up there because Churchill is known for its summertime when you have these beautiful Arctic wildflower blooms and beluga whales, polar bear season when ecotourists are able to view polar bears wandering around the conservation area. But during the winter, it doesn't kind of slow down. It slows down in a big way, and you really get this unique behind-the-scenes look of Churchill when things are just a little bit slower. So yeah, it's a great time of year to be up there. And again, it's quite cold. Like I was saying in that one of the first slides, I was taking a photo in about negative 20-degree weather. That's not an exaggeration. That's pretty typical. But with the cold comes really, really cool things. Here, I was talking about that mooncat earlier. Here is a sundog here. What's happening is when you have ice crystals that are way up high in the atmosphere, that sun reflects off of it just like a rainbow would with rain, and you get this incredible phenomenon. Again, it's hard to say if you're going to see this every trip, but a great time of year to do so because you get this real high altitude ice particles, big bright sun, blue skies, and very, very cold to suspend that ice up in the atmosphere. So even though we're up there for the Northern Lights, and that's one of our main goals each and every day, the days are filled with wonderful activities, great sights and sounds all around you, and again, this awesome, awesome winter wonderland scene. And since you're up in the Arctic, the light is really cool at this time of year. You get these really long, drawn-out sunrises and sunsets. Beautiful lighting if you're a photographer. We're just constantly out there looking for cool scenes. You have this, little sea oats in the foreground and these very chilly-looking but beautiful Arctic sunsets. And we're really just constantly going around looking for beautiful scenes, especially if you're on a photo trip. And like I was saying, not every trip's the same. You can get some winter weather at times. It doesn't usually last too long, but when you do, I think it adds the excitement and the enjoyment of the trip. This trip is really an adventure, and I think we capture it in a really great way with natural habitat. But of course, the lights are always going to be the focus. This is something that we're constantly designing the trip around to be even better and better each and every year. And one of the cool things is how we view the lights. We have a few different ways. It's not like we just stand outside the hotel every night and just look for them. We have these amazing abilities to get way out in the tundra. Like here, we're standing on a viewing deck of our Tundra Lodge, which is this sort of roving vehicle that we can position out at strategic points at the start of the season and get these great views away from any lights and beautiful backdrops and foregrounds and backgrounds. But that's not the only way we view it. We have this really cool thing that you may have heard about already. We built it especially for this trip. It's called our Aurora Pod, and it's essentially a trailer with an inside heated compartment, full glass windows, a lot like a greenhouse, that we can position, again, in a great area. We can sit inside of it for comfort while we're waiting for the Aurora to show up, or while we're warming up with a thing of hot cocoa or some coffee or some snacks. Maybe listen to a presentation. Maybe we just saw something really, really unique, and your expedition leader wants to talk about it and has a little photo presentation. Maybe on our photo trips we're talking about techniques. These are the settings we recommend that you go out and try right now. We have this great presentation space available to do that. But of course, we're going to be outside, we're going to be inside. If you're inside warming up, you're still going to get incredible views of the Aurora. But if you want to go outside and take some photographs, feel what that chilly Arctic wind's all about, we're right there, and you get incredible shows like this all around you. And again, one of our NatHab guests submitted this photo to us, and beautiful display of what our photo trips are all about. Our guides are not only expert naturalists, but also great photographers, and they know Churchill intimately. They know where these really cool, iconic scenes are, and you might go out and find this beautiful scene before you, where you have an authentic First Nations teepee with a beautiful moon and beautiful Aurora Borealis in the background, and spend a little bit of time taking that photo, and what a showstopper that is. But like I was mentioning, it's not just about the Aurora. We're doing things during the day. It's a beautiful area. What I like to say is that the trip is sort of shifted in the direction of a little bit later in the day. So yeah, we do stay up late, but we don't start the days at first morning light. We're going to start the days around maybe 9 or 10 and end the days maybe around midnight, kind of shift the days that way. Of course, if the aurora is kicking and we're up at 1 a.m. and we're just having the time of our lives, no one's going to be going inside. So they could end a little bit late, but that's why we're very, very flexible. We're going to be spending the days doing some really cool stuff, some quintessential Arctic activities. Maybe we're going to take a sled dog ride around the boreal forest of Churchill. Maybe we're going to interact with some of the sled dogs and learn, what a sled dog musher's life is all about. Taking care of the dogs, breeding the dogs, exploring on their own. Pretty neat stuff. Maybe we're going to see some sled dog puppies in the little town. Maybe they're just sort of being acclimated to the environment and get a chance to observe and play with them. And what would a trip be without curling, right? The quintessential Arctic activity. We have sled dog riding and curling. Yeah, the curling rink is up and in action at this time of year, and it's great to be able to get over there, throw a few stones, learn how it's all done, and spend an afternoon just kind of enjoying ourselves. So yeah, it's, again, what I really, really love about this trip is it's so very multidimensional. We're obviously focused on the aurora. We're doing it and viewing it in one of the best places on Earth. We're providing ample time up there to see it in a variety of different ways, whether you're out in the aurora pod, whether you're in the Tundra Lodge, or viewing any other one of the tricks up our sleeve like teepees and sled dog warming huts and things like that. And we've got all sorts of fun things in store for you. So, it's one of the neatest adventures, and, I really do underline adventure because we're out there. We're in the harsh environment, but when you're with Natural Habitat, we make sure you're taken care of. We have all sorts of great resources at our disposal, whether we're inside the Aurora pod, whether we have a warming hut set up for you with some hot cocoa to take the cold off, or whether we're opening the curling rink, especially for one of our groups, to enjoy a little match. It's a pretty phenomenal trip. So I encourage you all to consider it as a next destination, whether you've been up to Churchill already for one of our other seasons, like Polar Bears or Arctic Summer, and see it again, or whether this is your first time and you've always wanted to see the aurora and you want to go with a company and with guides that can confidently do it the best in the world. I would say look no further. Well, once again, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate the attention, and of course, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those now.
Well, Court, thank you. We've got some great questions. I'd just like to quickly invite our audience members to submit questions to Court. I will be reading those on your behalf to him. So you can do that over on the right-hand side of your screen in the control panel. Just click on the orange button with the white arrow to open the control panel and access the question box. So, Court, we have this question that came in. It says, are there trips where no aurora is seen? How frequently does this happen? Please know, I do understand nature makes no promises.
Yeah, very, very rare. Obviously, that wouldn't be a good thing if we, trip to trip or season to season had trips where we just got skunked. I think it's happened once or twice before in the long history of us doing it. So it's possible. Nature always has the final say, but it's pretty darn rare. If we were observing that as anything but very infrequent, we would extend the number of days up there. Really, when something like that would occur, it's because of weather. And, like I was saying, at this time of year, the weather's mostly rolled through. It rolls through quite a bit in the fall time period during our polar bear season. And by the time we're in February and March, end of January, February, and March, it's kind of too cold for big weather systems to form and move through. So we get great opportunities. And that's a great question, and it reminds me of something I did not mention, is that the aurora is on what's known as an 11-year solar cycle. And what happens is you have this pattern every 11 years. The sun repeats itself in terms of how much output it's giving off with these solar flares and solar wind. We've been looking at it, and when I say we, sort of the collective community of not just Natural Habitat, but scientists and astronomers and everything. And it was predicted that 2014 was going to be the very peak of that 11-year cycle, and then we'd be going back down in frequency again, hitting a trough in about 5 or 6 years. But even then, we've been doing these trips for so long that even in the years where science will say that it's not necessarily a peak year, it's still absolutely incredible up there. And that's why it's such a benefit of going up to Churchill. Yeah, sure, if we were going to go to Winnipeg or somewhere way outside of the Aurora Oval, we probably have pretty good luck in peak years, and then we might be wanting a little bit in those trough years. But Churchill, it's happening all the time. Now, stepping back to what I said about 2014 being a peak year, we were all thinking, okay, so let's see what happens in 2015. Well, 2015 was even better than 2014, so it gives me reason to believe that we haven't hit that peak yet, or we're still really centered right on that peak, because 2015 was just an extraordinary year. So, yeah, I think timing-wise, it couldn't be better than now to look at 2016 or 2017 as a time to get up there.
Good. Okay. Well, and just give us a recap, please. The best time of year for the lights, you said that would be January and February?
Yeah, we do our trips in the very best time. So it starts around January 30th, and we go through March. The lights are popping all year. It's not really like there's a certain season that the lights are going to show up more than others. Everything comes down to what the clouds are doing. If there's a time of year that has more clouds than others, we try to avoid that as a Northern Lights trip. So what we've done is we've zeroed in on, the least cloudy time of year, which is the dead of winter.
Okay. And if you go on one of those trips, what about seeing polar bears? Will you also see polar bears?
Pretty low chance of seeing polar bears, and the reason is that by the time winter comes, the Hudson Bay is completely frozen, and polar bears just don't hang out on land. They're out on the ice. They might only be 5, 10, 15 miles off. They might not be hundreds of miles away, but they're out in the ice hunting, so they don't really come on land unless we get the rare chance of seeing a mother and cub, which is certainly possible, but I would certainly not plan on it. For those folks that are wondering when's the best time to try to see polar bears and Aurora together, they're a little bit mutually exclusive. I will say that the polar bear season gives you a little bit better chance, but still the chance of Aurora is a lot slimmer in polar bear season. So I guess you're just gonna have to go with us twice.
It sounds like it'd be perfect. So what about staying in the Tundra Lodge? Is there an Aurora trip where you get to stay in the Tundra Lodge?
We don't actually stay out on the Tundra Lodge. We just have an evening out there where we have some good dinner. We have the whole thing to ourselves. It's not really operational during Northern Lights season like it would be on polar bear season. It's pretty much just the lounge car and then one of the sleeping cars. So it's not, yeah, if you've been with us on polar bear season and have been on the Tundra Lodge, it's not set up like that for Northern Lights. And frankly, I think it's probably more comfortable to not necessarily stay out on the lodge because it doesn't really give you a huge advantage. At this time of year, you're just as likely to see it from anywhere else as you are out at the Tundra Lodge.
Okay, all right. So what about the size of the group? How many people will you be traveling with on the Aurora trip?
We take anywhere from 10 to 14 people per trip. Yep, no more than that.
Okay. And then if one were decide to go on a dog sled ride, are the goggles and other clothing provided, or is it something that could be purchased there?
Yeah, it's a good question. All the clothing, in terms of the outer clothing, is provided. That's for dog sledding. That's for generally just walking around the entire time. So that is provided. As far as goggles go, we do have a handful of goggles on hand for the dog sled ride itself. But I do have to say that I would probably recommend, if you're going to go on the trip, I would probably get a really cheap pair of clear ski goggles because you'll want to wear them the whole time. That's probably the only piece of gear that we don't have for use the entire time. And again, you can probably find a pair at the local sporting goods store for $20, and I would just pick it up before the trip. But that being said, the dog sled riding is not terribly long, so you don't really get very bitterly cold. In addition, we do it during the day, so usually we have nice bright sun, kind of warms things up a little bit. The goggles, I would recommend using them more at night when you're kind of out and the wind might be picking up a little bit.
Okay. 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 Other than the train plane bit, what are the differences between the photography and non-photography trips?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the biggest difference is the amount of time we spend outside. For photographers, you obviously want to be outside taking photos, and we go to certain places that might not have a warming hut right next to us. It's not like we're going to be putting you out in the cold all night. We're all we're all human. We all get cold pretty quickly, but we'll be doing sort of uh, oscillating times where we might be outside for 20 minutes taking photos and doing instruction and watching the aurora, and then we might be back in the vehicle, or we might make our way back to the warming hut or into a building at that point. So I'd say it's probably more of a factor of what the group mentality is. If you're the kind of person that more or less wants to seize the day, carpe diem, and really get out there as much as you can, the photo trip tends to be out there. Whereas the non-photo trip, we have it set up where we're viewing the lights and the order that we're doing that a little bit more towards being inside viewing from the domes or from the pod or from the Tundra Lodge. But again, that being said, all those places you can easily quickly bop out, and if you wanted to take a photo and you're on a non-photo trip, you can still definitely do so. I'd say the other really big factor is that your guide on a photo trip is going to be a very accomplished photographer and know exactly how to photograph the lights. They're not the easiest things to photograph if you have no experience doing night photography. It's something you can quickly pick up on night one, I have no doubt. But you might not have an expedition leader that is very versed in the nuances of your shutter speed and dialing your ISO in if you're on a non-photo trip.
Okay, that's a good point. All right. Well, daylight hours. How many daylight hours would you have on this trip?
Oh, it's pretty decent. It's like 8 hours of daylight. It gets light around, 9 in the morning, and then it gets dark around maybe 4:35. Yep.
Oh, that's not bad.
Yeah, because keep in mind we're a couple months away from that winter solstice, so it's starting to get light pretty quickly, and every day adds a number of minutes onto each end of the day.
Okay. All right. Then we have this question just came in. It says, I've heard you can't see the lights with the naked eye, but only in photos. Is that true?
No, not true, not true. I will tell you, when I put up those couple of slides of these purples and magentas and strong aquamarine blues, when you see those, if you quickly do a Google search and look at the images, you're going to see all sorts of photoshopping that you have unicorns popping out of the lights and all sorts of stuff. The colors of the lights are very much a green color. You will, like I said, you will get that ribbon of pink on the bottom, and sometimes you'll get a really pronounced red on top. But just keep in mind that it's more of a sort of a greenish white color. Yeah, and so I guess what I'm getting at is that they always are more pronounced in photographs when you see those really, really vibrant ones. But the photos I showed in my presentation, I deliberately chose because they do accurately reflect what we were seeing. I don't want you to be expecting something that's out of a Disney movie by me showing some photos that were really saturated or something like that. So yeah, if you're going on the photos I've been showing, pretty good bellwether for what you're likely to see.
That's great. And we have a listener who was on the tundra, the polar bear safari last year. She noted that she felt like the lights with her naked eye were yellow, but green and red when she looked through her camera. What would explain that?
Yeah, so the way the camera processes the image is it's gonna pick up more of the color. So usually when you see a yellow or a whitish aurora with your naked eye, it just means that it's not at its peak strength. So you might be in the very beginning phases or the final phases of what's known as an auroral stubstorm, and as it gets more and more pronounced, it gets more and more vibrant and dense. The camera is always going to pick up a little bit more color. But still, if you're in the middle of one of those storms like we commonly see at this time of year, you get some pretty saturated greens even with your naked eye. Now, I will say I've had folks on my trips before, right next to one another, looking at the exact same aurora. Neither of them looking through a camera or neither of them looking through glasses or anything like that. and people do give different feedback on how saturated it looks, you know. So I'm not sure what the physiology behind that is, but yeah, it could be that certain people might be able to pick up the nuances in green a little bit better than other folks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we have another camera question here. We have a listener who uses a video camera. Any special equipment that he should bring?
So taking video of the aurora, no, you know, video cameras do quite well with low light sensitivity. So I think that you would be okay with that. I don't think there'd be any real special equipment other than a tripod. I will say that when you see these videos online on YouTube of, you know, beautiful moving auroras, what a lot of those folks are doing is what's known as time-lapse photography, and it's actually done with a still camera. We do a lot of that on our trips as well, and in our pre-departure materials, we give you all sorts of specifics on, you know, what we would recommend to bring. And most of the equipment, apart from the cameras themselves, you know, the equipment to do time-lapse photography is pretty inexpensive. So yeah, it's something I would encourage. And basically what it does, it just takes a photo every 5 or 10 seconds, and you have it taking the photos for 30, 45 minutes, and then each photo represents one frame in your video. And so, you know, videos that we see, movies, are all about 24 to 30 frames a second. So you stitch all those together in a little program online, and then it spits out this beautiful video. So that's what most folks will do to take video. But I've taken video as well of a really active aurora, and yeah, it comes out quite well.
Oh, good. Okay, another camera question. Do you use filters to photograph the aurora?
No need for filters. Apart from the normal UV filter that you have on just to, you know, protect the front of your lens. I've had folks ask about polarizers and things like that. You know, the big limiting factor with any sort of night photography, whether it's star photography or aurora, is light. And you don't want to have anything in front of your lens that would darken it. You want to kind of let it as much light in as possible. So no need for filters.
Okay, all righty. A couple logistic questions for you. There is a question here about whether all transportation is included in the package.
Yes, it is. All transportation is included. Yep. Yeah, it's one of those one-stop shop trips. You know, from the moment you land in Winnipeg to the moment you're about to get off on your plane, you're in our hands. We take great care of you. We're at the airport to pick you up, and we're flying to Churchill together, and we're on the train together. Yeah, you're with your expedition leader pretty much the entire time.
Okay, that's great. And is a visa required?
For U.S. citizens, no visa is required for Canada.
Okay. We're getting down to our last few questions here. Back to another question, a photography question. Can you handhold or do you need a tripod?
Definitely need a tripod. Yep, that's one thing I'll insist upon. You're looking at exposures of anywhere from 5 to 15 seconds, meaning that you're putting on that tripod, and there's a button that you push, and again, we sort of go over all this on the trip, but a button you push that allows that shutter to be open, allowing all that light to come in. So you would definitely need a tripod. But you don't need a fancy tripod, just something to hold it still.
Okay. So are there any opportunities on this trip to go snowshoeing or cross-country skiing?
You know, there is not on this trip. It's a great question. It'd be fun to do some snowshoeing out there. We do get out in the environment and do some walking, and we can certainly do some little strolls around. But no, as of 2015, we didn't do any snowshoeing excursions on this trip.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think this is our last question. Does each trip include a tour of the Northern Research Center?
Yes, the Northern Study Center, really cool facility. You know, as a scientist myself, I think it's such a cool model for how you can do Arctic research. I won't really go too much more into that, but yeah, that's something we do visit. And depending on the trip, we might even go back out to the Northern Study Center at night because they have some really cool spruce trees around there. Especially photo trips, we'll go out there at night again. Just because it's in a pretty cool environment. But yep, you'll get a tour of it. You'll see what's going on there. Really nice setup.
Excellent. Okay. Well, Court, that covers the questions. I am going to turn it back over to you for anything else you'd like to share before we close.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just once again, thank you for joining. I hope to see you up in Churchill. I think it'd be great to travel together up there. It's really one of my favorite places on earth, and I hope that you got a feeling of what it's going to be like from the presentation. Don't hesitate to reach out to me or your adventure specialist for some more information, and we'd love to see you out in the field.
My thanks as well. We appreciate having all of you here with us. So with that, we'll say good day and conclude our webinar. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.